reptilian shapeshifters are behind ISIS, the Federal Reserve and Sesame Street. This is the False Flag Nation podcast.
And we are back to another episode of False Flag Nation, the podcast where we delve into conspiracy theories, the occult, and all things esoteric. This is Joseph DeMarco. Joining me, as always, my co-host, William Revere.
Howdy, folks. Howdy, folks. That was a good intro. I like that. That was clean.
Yeah. It's getting better. Getting better. But we got an interesting topic for you this week, which I think is more relevant now than really ever before, and it's becoming more relevant with each passing year, and that's the coming student loan bubble, which is, based on what we're looking at here, is set to dwarf the housing crisis of 2008. But first, we got some news, pretty interesting developments in the last few weeks with regard to terrorism, GMO foods, and whatnot. So, Will, bring us up to speed here. What's been going on since our last transmission?
Yeah, our last transmission, we did the topic of GMOs. So, interestingly enough, just yesterday, I saw on Yahoo that Campbell's Soup, the large, huge billion-dollar corporation that creates, the soup mixes and soup and everything, Campbell's chicken noodle, tomato, all that crap. They are going to be the first large, corporation to voluntarily label their products as genetically modified, which is pretty incredible that, the free market is really responding to what customers want. So before even legislation was to take place, which is probably not going to, we see companies actively trying to satisfy customer needs. So this is really pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think that is going to be the way that the people beat these guys, is just through the free market. Just pressure the private companies that sell GMO products to label them, and then private companies will take it upon themselves because of consumer demand to do that. We're not going to be able to rely on the FDA to do this, as we thoroughly covered in that previous episode. The FDA and Monsanto and all the other ones are in bed with each other. It's not going to happen. It's not going to be some benevolent action from Uncle Sam. It's going to be people voting with their wallets. That's going to pressure these people.
Exactly. And who knows what's going to happen to Campbell's Soup. This could be the biggest mistake of their financial lives, too, because customers are going to respond accordingly. And either it's going to be greeted with, the same sales, or there's going to be a huge drop. And I predict there's going to be a huge drop.
Yeah. No, I think it's going to be good for them in the long term and just harmful in the short term, because people are going to stop buying, and then they'll have to switch to non-GMO food, non-genetically modified ingredients. And maybe that means they have to raise their prices a little bit. But once they do that, people will start buying from them again.
Exactly. And what a position this puts Progresso and other soup companies in if they decided that we're going to make specifically non-genetically modified foods and put them in our soups. I mean, you've got the free market really kind of filtering out the lesser products. So it's going to be very interesting to see.
Yeah, that could be the domino effect. Campbell's is a big enough company that it could force all their competitors to follow suit. Yeah. So we'll definitely keep you posted on that. What else has been going on?
I think just yesterday or a couple days ago, there was the ISIS-inspired attack in Philadelphia. Now,
Oh yeah, that dude
there's
looks.
some pretty incredible footage of a guy literally walking up to a cop car at a stoplight and just unloading. And he got so close that he was able to literally stick the gun in the car.
Yeah,
So fortunately, the police officer didn't get. I think he was hurt, but he didn't die, which is
yeah.
incredible. So,
What I heard was that he was hit. The guy fired 11 shots and hit him 3 times.
wow.
Somehow he survived. He got out of the car and chased him and shot him in the ass. And then they arrested the wannabe ISIS member, who looks like Rick Ross, by the way, the rapper, not Freeway Ricky Ross. So this is just a bizarre story all around. I mean, obviously we're happy that cop survived and everything.
Yes.
No one deserves that, but I gotta say, I wondered when I saw that video, how does someone miss? You fired 11 shots and only 3 of them hit, and you were standing 6 inches away from the what the fuck?
Either way, it's a good thing. So yeah.
Yeah, everyone who was supposed to won in this situation.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean that's the second ISIS-inspired "quote unquote" attack in the U.S.
Yeah, that's only been about
month.
Yeah, that's only been about 6 weeks since San Bernardino. So this is unfortunately it's probably not going to be the last one.
So we will keep everybody updated on that as well, and offering our commentary.
Yeah.
On the ISIS situation.
Yeah, and I feel like I need to throw out what's going on with the stock market. This is the worst opening week, I think, ever in stock market history.
Yeah.
Something happened in China. I think it was they devalued their currency or something. I'm not an economist. I'm not an expert on this stuff, so don't quote me. But
they actually shut down trading in China multiple times this past week.
Yeah, I think they were only open. It was only open for trading like 29 minutes one day. It was everyone just panicked. They shut everything down,
right.
And it caused this domino effect. The stock market went down a lot. I just logged into my retirement account just to check it out yesterday, and it's like $1,000 less than what it was in December.
So, isn't that wonderful?
Oh yeah.
But did you check your Bitcoin?
Stuff. Bitcoin has gone up.
Yes, it has this week. I mean, granted, it's gone up and down, but there's been, I think, right now as we speak, it is 453.
Yeah,
which is pretty impressive because on Monday it was only about 421.
Yeah, it was around there.
So it's the Bitcoin market respond accordingly as well.
Yeah, hedge your bets, people. Now is the time to buy it. It's still pretty low. But how about we start talking about this? Because I feel like this is something that affects the both of us, affects just about everyone we know. Yeah. I mean, we're both in our late 20s here. And this could be the defining economic issue for the next decade or so. So
absolutely,
we got to talk about what's going on with the student loan debt in America and the college industrial complex. So we'll start us off here. What inspired you to start researching this topic?
I mean, this is something that I've been involved with for the past over 4 years.
Yeah,
and obviously I attended undergraduate school.
Yeah,
and achieved my college degree. I got my 4-year college degree.
Woohoo!
Yay!
Exactly. You followed the script. You did.
Exactly.
You were a good American. You did what society.
I went even further because I wanted to be a successful person in life. So because I was indoctrinated so much, and it wasn't all a bad experience, but I went on to get my MA.
Woohoo! And how long did that take?
That took 3 years.
Okay, so this is 7 years. You were dutifully following the system. You were dutifully plugged into the matrix, and so what was the result?
If anybody has anything to say about this, it's me, and I can say personally that this was just wow, what a disaster. But I think we ought to start back at the beginning, and I think this is something that all 20-somethings can relate to.
Yeah,
and like you said, but look, in the United States especially, we've been force-fed college since what? We were 9, 10, 11 years old.
Yeah.
It was success equals college and college equals success.
Exactly. I remember, when we were growing up, it was never if you go to college when talking to your parents. It's not if you go to college. It was when you go to college.
Exactly.
It was just like no one. It was never a question. Of course, you're going to college. Don't you want to be successful? Don't you want to maximize your opportunities in life? Of course, you're going to college.
Exactly. And that reminded me. I remember in high school, a couple days before we were graduating, we were having a circle discussion, and people were going around the room and we were talking about what university or college we were going to attend, and everybody was so proud.
Yeah.
And there were a couple people who said, "No, I got a job at Gillette, and I'm going to start working there." And I remember people just like laughing and just saying, "Oh wow, good for him, nice. That'll be great. You're going to be poor or whatever." And people really thought that.
Yeah,
but you know what?
Joke's on them.
Exactly. That kid, one of those kids, is quite successful now. So. And that's not a guaranteed result. But what I'm saying is, we were force-fed through propaganda, through the state, through our schools, through our parents who thought the same thing, and probably not with no malintent, but we were forced into obtaining a college degree. And we really didn't have any choice in the matter. It was either do this or you're going to be a fucking loser.
Yeah, that's definitely the message that was sent to you, and I think it's still going on now.
Definitely,
that's the kind of mentality that is pushed upon students by these old economy Steve types that went to school in the 70s, back when it cost like $2,000 to go to school. And you hear them saying things like, when I was in school, I paid for my tuition with a summer job and everything. You could actually do that back then.
Right.
That was That was not some impossible pipe dream. Like, you really could deliver pizzas and pay for your tuition and an apartment and a car back then. Like that was a real possibility.
And, we'll get into that shortly, but the reason why we're in one of the problems that we are now, economy-wise, is because we lowered the standards for what it was to get a college degree. We lowered our academic standards, and we made this false sense of reality that everybody not only deserves to get an education, but has the right to, which I adamantly disagree with.
Yeah, it's this. Well, it's in a way, I guess it's a logical stepping stone from the creation of the public school system, where like everyone is guaranteed access to a high school education.
Right.
Which, I think that's going back about 100 years now. Back then, that was considered revolutionary. A couple decades, people begin to accept that as normal. And then, I guess it would make sense. The step up from that would be everyone has the right to go to college, or it's a privilege. And that's, again, I think that's back around the 70s when the government started offering these cheap loans to people in the form of financial aid to go to school. And then that's what started this domino effect of ever increasing tuition, because there's all this cheap money going around for students to go to school. Of course they're going to fucking inflate their rates.
Right. These universities have essentially a blank check.
Yeah.
And they're going to guarantee federal money coming in. So why not fucking pay their janitors fucking $90,000 a year? Why not pay their staff ridiculous wages? Why not have fucking sports teams that generate millions and millions of dollars? Why not build these ridiculous fucking stadiums that have nothing to do with education at all?
I don't know if it generates millions. I know it costs millions.
They
spend millions of dollars on 40 people on the football team. Have you seen what some of these NCAA coaches make? Like some of the D1 football coaches are making like $3-4 million a year.
Yeah.
To be who's that guy in that documentary? I can't remember his name. He's with the National Inflation Association. He called them grown-up jocks.
Yes,
To be
Gerald Celente.
Yeah, General Celente. To be a football coach. I'd be surprised if NFL coaches are making that much. I mean, some of them probably are, but like,
oh yeah,
that's absurd. It's absurd. Your tuition's that high, and you're paying your football coach $3 million a year.
Exactly,
and your son doesn't even play football, and
right.
you have to pay his salary. And
the thing is too, the merchandise and the sales for tickets and stuff, that generates a ton of money for the university.
Yeah,
but it doesn't reflect the academic values of the university.
That's not, and not to mention the construction costs of building that stadium. I know, like, I think it's University of Texas. They actually have a train, like a metro, inside their stadium. It's a big circular track that so you can go from like the east end of the stadium to the west end. I wish I was making this up. I mean, it's a huge school. There's like, I think there's like 30,000 kids there. So yeah, there's going to be more infrastructure, but that's insane. And I went to a small school. There were only like 1,700 kids at my school, and I can't tell you how much construction occurred while I was there.
Right.
Like, and when I entered as a freshman, and between that time and when I finished, I was one of those rare people that actually manages to graduate in 4 years. So in the span of 4 years, they built like a whole separate wing of student housing, like 5 different buildings, garden apartments, a whole new academic hall, the beginnings of a bridge with an overpass, like pedestrian bridge that goes to some other field that hasn't been developed yet. Like, there's 1,700 kids there. Like, why do you need all these buildings? What is it?
Yeah,
it's ridiculous. And then you have to hire more staff to maintain those buildings and everything,
right? But
buy insurance on them, and
they're anticipating more and more students, which is what the society is generating.
Yeah,
because they've lowered values so much, and they've lowered standards so much.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing that we learned when we were researching this is the 90-10 principle that comes with this is the law that states that schools have to make 90% of their from non-government sources. So their 10% of their profit is, whatever, those are loans from the government. 90% of it, whatever that their total profit is, has to come from somewhere else. So where does that cost get passed on to? Most of it's coming from the tuition.
Right,
but the students, they foot the bill onto the students. And
of
course they were going to do that anyway because of all the aforementioned cheap money going around.
Exactly. It's just a circle.
Yeah, it's these two things working synergistically, and that are causing this exponential increase in tuition.
But a couple things I want to hit too is, I think we can have an honest conversation. I think I think that if our listeners dug deep and they realized the truth, they would know that the college education that they paid for wasn't worth it.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
I think that 4 years or 5 years of drinking, partying, smoking, fucking, and skipping class, I mean, really, was it worth it?
Well, that's what college used to be, Will. I mean, you can make the argument for the college experience. You get to network with people, make friends and whatnot, and that is true.
But why are you paying for that?
Yeah, but hold on. You're not paying for that specifically, but that was seen as like a rite of passage to growing up. All the the partying and making friends and making memories and whatnot. But now it's not even like that anymore. Now you have safe spaces and cultural Marxism and this insane politically correct brainwashing indoctrination institutes that are modern colleges in the United States, at least. You saw those kids at Yale protesting over an email about something that never happened, and
right.
Kids demanding the resignation of the school president because of someone allegedly said some racist remarks in a conversation like 5 months before the protest happened. Like this is what your money's paying for. You're paying you're buying a $30,000 a year vacation on some stupid like glorified campground with a bunch of fancy buildings, so you and your classmates can throw protests over nothing. Demand your president resign. Probably get falsely accused of rape because of the ambiguous, unconstitutional kangaroo courts where you're guilty until proven innocent. And then once that's all over, after 6 years, which is the typical amount of time it takes someone to graduate, you're $120,000 in debt, and and the interest rate's 6%, and you can't get a job.
And the more importantly too is, the idea of college used to be getting a quality education.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I can speak honestly in saying that 90% of my professors didn't give a shit. They were there to collect a paycheck. They regurgitated information, and especially in my master's degree program,
Really?
The professors that I had required us to buy their books for the lessons that we were learning.
Wait, like books they wrote?
Exactly.
Are you fucking serious? So they're like pocketing some of that money.
Of course.
Course. What?
So I was reading books. So basically I was standing there while a teacher read her own book to us in class. So
wow.
I mean, I think if people are true to themselves, they'll realize that, you can get a better education by going online for fucking 10 minutes and finding whatever the fuck you want, or opening up a book. So
that's the thing, that there isn't much. I mean, aside from the social experience, which there's other ways to build friends and network with people. There isn't anything you can learn in college that you can't learn without going into 6 figures of debt. Like you can learn those things on the internet. You can find all these books you're supposed to buy. You can probably find PDFs of them online. You can go to a library. I think there's that line from Good Will Hunting, where he's making fun of that dork in the bar. I think they were competing over some girl or something. And Matt Damon's character is like, you dropped all this money on a fancy degree, and you could have paid 50 cents for it for a library card and gotten the same thing.
Exactly.
And it's,
and that's not to say that some of the professors are not worth their weight in gold.
Yeah.
Because I think that is true. There's, especially for, let me actually get into this. I think that the university system and college system is effective for a certain trades. And those would be nursing, doctors, probably law, and engineering, and what I would call the hard sciences. That you're not going to
like
teach
STEM
yourself
fields,
to be a doctor. That's it. You're not going to teach yourself to be a nurse. These are things that take skill, and they need to be taught by experts. So I fully agree with that. But the idea that you're going to teach someone how to fucking paint in college is absurd. The idea that you're going to teach somebody philosophy principles is absurd.
Yeah, and this is the thing. Like it's a tough call, because in a way it's not a tough call, because it's not worth going into debt to read books by Descartes. You can just go to the library to do that.
Yeah.
I feel like those are things worth talking about, but not necessarily paying for, or at least paying that much for. A lot of this stuff, they're pushing this myth that you need a degree. It doesn't matter what it is, just for God's sakes, just get a degree, because the machine, the education industrial complex requires fresh recruits, requires fresh blood year after year. Otherwise, it can't sustain itself. And if this sounds a little conspiratorial, one, you should expect that, because that's what this show is about. Two, it's actually true. Because one example that we learned about was the the pharmacist shortage hoax back around 2008, 2009. Do you remember this? I actually remembered seeing this on the news when I was watching that documentary.
Yeah,
I brought it up.
remember.
For people who don't know, there was all these stories in the media going around 2008, right around the time of the first economic crash, about how there is this massive shortage of pharmacists, and we need to add about 150,000 pharmacist jobs in the U.S. by 2020. And where are we going to find these people? And being a pharmacist, that's a pretty high-paying job. Depending on where you are. So just millions of people went to pharmacy school, or went. Maybe it's.
Yeah, it's
maybe
pharmacy school.
Okay, I was confused, but sorry, brain's a little frazzled here. But anyway, there were far more applicants and graduates with degrees in pharmacy than there were jobs available, and a lot of those people couldn't get jobs. Well, what created that demand, this artificial demand in the first place? The reality was there were 15 large pharmacy schools opening up around that time. And like we said, they need new recruits in order to keep covering their expenses. Otherwise, they're going down. Like they can't. Most colleges are not operating in the black. They need your money.
Right.
So they had all these people. They took their money, their tuition, and sent them off. Like, all right, go. You're gonna conquer the world. Go. And a lot of them can't get jobs.
Yeah, and I think looking back, I think that some of that could be just the total economic meltdown that occurred in the 2008, 2009, 2010 area, because I do know pharmacists that are our age, my age, who are gainfully employed now.
Yeah, that's not to say pharmacy isn't a worthless degree. What I'm saying is that the market was saturated by this myth that there's a demand, there's an immediate need for these people, and it's like, I don't know. Did you ever read Grapes of Wrath in school?
Yes.
You will. There's a chapter in that book where they're describing, in the beginning of the book, when they make the decision to drive from Oklahoma out to California, fleeing the Dust Bowl, because of these flyers that are being passed out by companies in California, like orchards, these agricultural magnates that need people to pick peaches or oranges or whatever out there. And then they go out there and none of them can get jobs. There's little Hoovervilles sprouting up because none of them can get out jobs. And then later they find out by someone who's been there for a while that these agricultural tycoons, they have 800 job openings. So they print like 15,000 flyers and saying we have 10,000 job openings. We need people now. And then all these people come, and then it's a race to the bottom, or it's a reverse auction. People are competing to work for less money until they're rock bottom, and they're paying them pennies on the dollar, far less than what they thought they were going to make. And in a way, that's the same thing. These schools are like those tycoon farmers during the Great Depression, which have misled those people fleeing the Dust Bowl in search of work.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And another thing is that, like I touched on before, was this right for education, which is being forced down people's throat. It's that you have a right to water, you have a right to air, you have a right to education. No, you don't.
All right, air. Bill, I think we can agree on air. That's
you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The idea is you don't fucking have a right to education. You don't. Either you are smart enough to get into a university or you're not. And there's according to the Department of Labor Statistics, this was 2010, I believe, It said that 71% of high school graduates went on to a 2 or 4 year college program. 71%.
See, that's the thing. Like a college degree doesn't mean anything when everybody has one. And then this creates the thing, which it sounds like you did, where you went on to get a master's degree afterwards to increase your intrinsic value in the marketplace.
Right. And
And
everybody else is getting master's degrees now too.
so then people go on to get doctorates,
And those are worthless as well.
well, not worthless, but a lot of times you can be overqualified for something and people won't hire you because they think, oh God, he's going to ask for too much money.
Right.
And that'll a friend of mine was thinking about going for a PhD, and one of his professors talked him out of it, saying that he's like, look, I'm lucky. I have a lot of friends, colleagues who are forced to move to an area they don't want to go to, or
Yep.
they can't get a job because people won't hire them. They feel like they can't afford someone with their credentials, so it's too much of a good thing. But and an interesting way that I think this ties into the general trend of tyranny and intrusive government we see is, what we described with the pharmacy schools. The same thing's happening with law schools.
Mm-hmm.
Law schools are, everyone thinks being a lawyer, oh God, you're going to be making bank when you're done. I think most people know that law school tuition is very expensive. That's pretty common knowledge. So they're aware that they're taking on a lot of debt, but they figure, I'll be working at a law firm. I might have my own practice in a few years. I'll be making a lot of money. It's worth it. It's an investment, which, seems logical. But these schools, again, they're saturating the marketplace with lawyers. There's too many lawyers and not enough laws to enforce. So what do? They make more laws, and
so they need more paper pushers.
Yeah, exactly. They're paper pushers, and they're putting out these statistics like 90% of law school graduates are employed within 7 months. That doesn't mean working at a law firm. That could be employed at Target. That could be employed at a lumber yard, Barnes and Noble, whatever. They're just, as long as you're employed, that makes them look good to new people. And again, all they're concerned about is churning these people through the system and sucking their money out every step of the way. And an interesting point that was made during that film was, why are so many people on Capitol Hill lawyers? You look up most congressmen, lawyers, congressmen, senators, whatnot, backgrounds. They all went to law school. Well, why is that? Well, they're creating more laws to provide jobs for their friends. They're creating the more red tape and regulation and stuff that exists, the more work lawyers have. It's this machine. It's like the military-industrial complex that creates the problems it solves, which creates more problems, and it's this endless cycle of corruption and nonsense.
And I think let's take this topic to a different direction too.
Yeah.
I always go back to the New World Order. Well, what does this have to do with the New World Order? Let me explain.
Here we go. You knew it was coming, folks.
This is what we're about here.
Yeah.
Let me first state by saying, in the 1970s, people graduated college because they got into a college because they were relatively intelligent.
Yeah.
They afforded their own their own tuition, and they paid for it, and they got out of college and they got a job, which is great.
Yeah.
Then they bought the home. They got a mortgage.
Yeah.
And they were able to afford that because they went to school. Now what we have is people graduating school with nothing physical except for a piece of paper, no guarantee of a job, and a mortgage hanging over their head without even having a fucking house.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, if you're going to take on that mortgage-sized debt, it's good to at least have a house to show for it,
right. Exactly.
You don't even have that.
So then you have, from the very beginning, I believe, you've had this agenda to train young people into thinking that they won't be successful without obtaining a college degree.
Yeah.
Okay? They get their college degree. They take out massive amounts of federal loans. They essentially are indentured servants for the next, fucking lifetime. Because if you think about it, Most of these people aren't going to get very high paying jobs. They're going to pay interest on their loans, which is going to basically, when all things said and done, add another $60,000 onto most of their loans.
Yeah.
And you're going to be permanently crippling financially all of these college graduates for the rest of their lives. And they're never, ever, ever going to be able to escape the debt because you can't discharge it through bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So you have an entire generation of Americans that are financially crippled, and it's all because of the federal government's involvement in student loans and the education system.
Yeah.
So you have a weaker group in society financially. They have less confidence in themselves. They have less ability to prepare, less ability to stand up, less ability to voice their opinions because they're in debt so high, because they're afraid they're going to lose their job because they have to keep paying for things.
Yeah.
So they're permanently indebted, and they're part of the wage slave lifestyle, which is something that the New World Order promotes.
Yeah, I am inclined to agree with you. I think a lot of this is by design. The powers that be do not want a society of people that are thinking and are financially prosperous and are able to devise a better future for themselves. Our entire society is designed to enslave you with debt and keep you in this perpetual cycle of working and preparing for work, going to work, being at work, returning from work, recovering from work. And so you never have time to see the bigger picture and think about the world in a different way. Imagine things as they could be rather than what they are. Like it's the previous generations, it was you go to college, you buy a house. Why? Because I don't know, because that's what you do. Now it's you go to college, and then I guess if you haven't been utterly crushed by the manacles of debt within the first 5 years, get a house too, because a lot of that mindset is still clinging on in people's heads. I've know a couple people who bought houses who have absolutely no business buying a house. And, it's a recipe for disaster. You have two young people, both with 70 grand in student loan debt. The two of them get married. They put their shitty credit history together because they're probably not making their payments on time. And then they get a house on top of that. And then they have a couple kids. And now, the job market's crappy as it is. So this it's almost like this is a blueprint for destroying the middle class. This combined with the trend of outsourcing, which began around the 70s as well. It really seems like the 70s is when all this started to go into motion.
Yeah, and if you look at it through that lens, it makes sense. Like we both said, the idea is to maintain a class in society that is afraid. And what's the most, what drives you to go to work in the morning? It's essentially, if you boil it down, it's fear. It's you have things you need to pay for, the responsibility to pay for them. That's why you go to work.
Yeah.
And if you don't go to work, it is so much more worse than going to work. So
yeah,
it's and now you cripple, like I said before, people with this massive debt for this bullshit that they signed up for and were force fed for years and years and years. You're just creating a scared, pussy little society that's just gonna basically work just to pay off this debt that is just made up by the government. It's numbers in a computer. It's fucking bullshit.
It's an abstraction. It's just, and when people are working to survive, that's all people are thinking about. They're in this lower state of consciousness where it's just like, I gotta survive. I gotta scrape away my little, get my little scrap of food to survive another day. And then they come home and collapse on the couch and just, okay, I made it another day. Right. And people in that state are not going to think about higher level things. Like, yeah, have you noticed how these global elite bankers and defense contractors are kind of fucking us over? Like, people in that state are not going to think of things like that. They're not going to look at bigger pictures. They're not going to look at things like the Trans-Pacific Partnership or question why we're invading countries in the Middle East, at least in the beginning. You know, everyone was pretty blindly supporting the Iraq War because they were caught up in that machine.
Right. And to that point as well, that's why, you know, it used to be that the government was, they had good benefits, but it was a generally low salary. That's not true anymore.
Yeah.
The government jobs are better than the private sector jobs.
A
And
lot
they
of
do
them,
that
yeah.
specifically to grab people and to hang on to them and to maintain their loyalty. If you walk away from a government job, you're fucking stupid. Most of them have pensions, and that's done specifically to maintain support for the status quo.
Yeah, that's one of the few sectors where you can get a good pension anymore in the U.S. is with a government job. It's kind of sad, but there's not many companies offering good pensions anymore. But and that's the reminds me of the. That old statistic is like, you'll make so much more money if you have a degree. If you have those guys in the fracking fields in North Dakota were making fucking bank, and a lot of them are felons. Like, those guys didn't go to college, and they were probably making six figures within their first year. There's people, the fracking boom has died down, but there's comparable things like that. There's welders, people working on oil rigs and whatnot. Those people didn't go to college. Most of them didn't anyway, and they're doing very well. And guess what? They don't have $150,000 worth of debt to pay off.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that another prong of this trident of tyranny in the workforce too is that people say, you don't need a college degree to get a job. Actually, in a lot of respects, you do. A lot of the requirements for jobs, you do need a college degree, and I think that's furthering the push. So you have these companies, large scale. If you try to get a job at any bank without a college degree, you're just not going to get one.
Probably not happening. They want that finance degree, and it's a lot of these jobs are they're bullshit jobs. They're like these service sector jobs that really don't create any value. They don't contribute anything of real tangible value to the economy. And when this ridiculous house of cards collapses, which it will, those are the jobs that are going to see the salaries decline by 90%. It's not going to be the so-called dead end jobs that we were talking about before.
Right, and interestingly enough, I've been able to support myself and maintain a good level of income, and it's been through manufacturing jobs and production jobs, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which had nothing to do with my college degrees, by the way. What
was your degree in?
I have a BA in history and I have a master's degree in religious studies.
Okay, and what was your goal with the why did you choose to get the master's? What did you want to do with that?
I wanted to be a college professor.
Okay.
And I remember the first class I ever took in my master's degree program. The professor was a doctorate from Yale.
Yeah.
He got a doctorate degree, which that is something to be proud of. I'm not knocking any of those guys.
Yeah, that still carries a lot of status. I'm not saying people are not going to be impressed by credentials anymore. They still are. The question is it worth it financially?
Yeah, and I think that there's something to be said for Ivy League degree. I truly do. However, he told me flat out he lived in New Jersey and he was driving to Connecticut for a part-time job, and he had graduated 6 years ago. So that should just tell you the financial situation he was in to drive, 60 miles for a part-time position 2 states away.
Let me guess, he bought a house.
No,
That's
no.
why he couldn't move.
I don't know why he was in Jersey or whatever, but
Yeah.
he point blank said, if you have a job that pays decently, you shouldn't be here right now. And that was very interesting to come from a doctorate.
PhD from Yale. Wow.
And
Cat's out of the bag.
I think that, and I think I'll be attacked by a lot of people, and probably rightfully so, that, a degree in religious studies isn't really a moneymaker. And I totally understand that, and I agree with that too. But the idea is that, higher education isn't necessarily going to guarantee you any type of financial stability. In fact, it's going to take any financial stability that you have.
Yeah, no, that's true, unfortunately. And, right as of right now, the total student loan debt in the U.S. is about $1 trillion. At the time that that documentary was made, by the way, the documentary is called College Conspiracy, and it was produced by the National Inflation Association. I don't know if we mentioned that earlier. Definitely check it out. A lot of very good questions being raised there. At that time, in 2011, it was $830 billion. Now I believe it's over $1 trillion.
Yeah.
So, ironically, and given that most people currently are never going to earn enough to pay off their respective debts, it really seems like, ironically, the only way they would be able to pay that off, that student loan debt, is through hyperinflation.
Yeah, you're right. It's funny, in Germany, 1934, 35-ish, you had people who were the only people who made out well were the people who were in debt, because they had hyperinflation. So they had a debt that was set at a certain price, but then the mark,
they started printing them, like firing up the printing presses, and then
massive debts.
Yeah, so that would be a good thing in the sense that people could get out of debt, but their money would become worthless afterwards. So the price of food and housing and shit goes up. So
do you think that the federal government is going to forgive the student loans?
Well, I think they're going to be forced to do a bailout like they did with the automotive industry and the housing and whatnot, and they did that by just firing up the printing presses. The Federal Reserve System created $4.5 billion just out of nothing. They just threw the holy water and said $4 billion now exists.
Right.
And that caused inflation. And then they're going to do that again. Or 4.5 trillion, excuse me. That was way off. But they're going to do that again. And then the value of the dollar is going to go down even further than it already has. The dollar's lost like 98% of its value since 1913 when the Federal Reserve was established. There's a lot of speculation. This could really be what destroys the U.S. dollar.
And it's sad because I'm kind of torn on that situation too, because do I think that the majority of college graduates were duped? Yes. Do I think that it's 100% their fault? No. Do I think that the government is at least partially to blame for the decisions that 18-year-olds made that are going to affect their entire life? Absolutely. So I think that there needs to be some sort of federal level adjustment made to student loans, because it's just absurd right now.
Yeah. I think we have to go through that pain period, though. It's like, because that's the only way this system would ever be undone. The federal government has to get out of subsidizing student or tuition costs at all. Yeah. Like if private universities were competing with each other for students, they would lower their prices, and then they would get more applicants that way. And again, it would really only it would bring us back to those days when it only cost $2,000 to go to school.
Exactly, and I think that's a point we need to stress here too. If there's one entity to blame for the situation that we're in now, it's the federal government's involvement in higher education, period.
I think the majority of the blame goes to them. I assign a hefty part of the blame to the schools themselves too, because a lot of them just. I know there's the 90-10 rule that is real, so a lot of them were forced to jack up their tuition, but a lot of them were doing it anyway, and they're lining their pockets with tuition money, and they're building shit that doesn't need to be built, and just destroying their students' futures in the process, and they need to be held accountable for that.
I agree with that.
Well, as you can say that, as you can see, that's a topic the two of us feel pretty strongly about. I am almost done paying off my student loans. I graduated with about $22,000 in student loan debt, and I'm one of the lucky ones. I got off easy. A lot of people are in much worse shape, and we want to spread awareness about this to prevent other people from having that happen to them. So, I mean, Will, what advice would you have to some of our younger listeners, like an 18-year-old fresh out of school, who's heard a lot of the traditional propaganda about higher education, and he doesn't know what to do? What would you say to him?
What I would say is try to figure out what career you want to have before you're going into school. If you want to be a doctor, yes, go to college. If you want to be a physicist or an engineer or something like that, yes. If you want to study the hard sciences, yes, you can go to university or college, and I would support that. However, if you don't know what you want to do, or if you want to go and work in an office somewhere, or you want to be a basic accountant or something like that, no. It's not worth it. It's a disaster. You will regret it, and you should try and find some sort of work and then pursue your education goals elsewhere on the internet, the library, that god-awful place that no one goes to anymore. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah, there you might
get sham.
You can get the social aspect of the library as well. If a lot of people start going to those again, they would be lively places to hang out, as opposed to like going to an old church. But I mean, maybe you can't play beer pong in a library, but there's ways around that. Do whatever you did in high school. Fill up your parents' vodka bottles with water and just cover your tracks. You'll figure it out. You'll find ways to have fun. You don't have to go $30,000 a year into debt to do that. It's not worth it.
Yeah, because then later, if you can have real fun when you can actually drink legally, and you can, without a bunch of debt.
That's right. When you're in your 20s and you actually have money, we are assuming you have a source of income at that point, which is easier said than done in this economy. But if you're going to be a lot closer to getting to that level with if you didn't take on 6 figures of debt before you even started. So, any closing thoughts? Will, we're almost out of time here. This hour flew by. This is
and I think we were kind of on a dreary note, which we shouldn't, this is a serious topic, but I can personally say nothing's motivated me more than the financial situation given student loans that I'm in. So if something's driving you, use that to escape and create your own destiny.
That's true.
Otherwise you're just going to be, a wage slave. So you have to use that, and if you're in debt, you need to figure out how to get yourself out of it. Yeah. And that's pretty good motivation.
That is good motivation. Don't be another one of these baristas with a master's degree and just accept your fate. There, like if you're frustrated because you were tricked, just forgive yourself and harness that frustration. Use it to build your escape plan and just get on it. Just read books, educate yourself. There is a way. People are doing it. So it's outside the scope of this episode. How to exactly to do that? We might do one in the future, but get after it. Whatever it is. Anything else, Will?
That's it. That's all I got. I think this was good. I think this is going to resonate a lot with our viewers. So let us know what your thoughts are as well.
Yep. Check us out at falseflagnation.com for this episode's show notes. Leave some comments. Let us know what you thought. Let us know how the student loan bubble is affecting you, how you guys are dealing with these debts you may or may not have picked up, hopefully not, and what changes you'd like to see occur in the next few years, or ideas you have about how to improve the situation. And we're all ears here. We'd love to talk about this some more, and I'm sure we'll be revisiting this topic over the course of this year. Check us out on Twitter at False Flag Nation and on Facebook at our False Flag Nation fan page. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. That helps you because you get our new content automatically, and it helps us because it makes our ratings go up. And if you did enjoy this episode, please leave a review. Let us know what you thought. That's all for this week. We'll say goodbye to the lovely people.
All right, take care. Thanks again.
Thanks for joining us, folks. We'll see you next week.